Listen. You know that feeling when you lose your keys? That little jolt of panic, the padding of pockets, the frantic mental retracing of your steps. Now, imagine your keys are a 9-foot-tall, trans-dimensional shadow panther that eats fear and purrs at a frequency that can curdle milk 3 sectors away. That was the kind of morning high Proctor Kthar was having. The klaxons on Star Station Epsilon 9 weren't just loud, they were offensively, personally loud. They screamed in a carefully modulated sawtooth wave designed by a committee of Grondorian sadists to maximize psychological distress. It was working. Report. Kthar shrieked, his elegant chitinous mandibles clicking together in a staccato rhythm of pure, unadulterated terror. He was a Xylaxian, a species that looked like a praying mantis who had successfully unionized and then gotten a PhD in being condescending. Right now, his academic poise was shedding faster than a molting glibworm. Across the gleaming command bridge, Security Chief Grohl slammed a meaty, 4-fingered fist onto a console. Sparks, purely for dramatic effect because all the systems were optical, dutifully flew out. Grohl was attack, a species that resembled a sentient boulder with anger management issues. His entire philosophy could be boiled down to shoot it, and if it's still moving, shoot it with a bigger gun. Reporters were boned, Proctor. Grohl bellowed, his voice like gravel in a rock tumbler. Specimen 734 is out. Repeat, the Gloomfang is out. It breached tertiary containment in Xenobiology Lab 4. It bypassed the kinetic barriers, phased through the hard light containment field, and apparently told the Class 4 energy grid to, and I'm quoting the system log here, reevaluate its life choices. A terrified-looking ensign named Tleep, a small, furry creature with enormous, perpetually worried eyes, whimpered from her station. Sir, it didn't just breach containment. It left a note. Kthar's antennae twitched violently. A note. Don't be absurd, Ensign. It's a Class Omega apex predator, a living void, a sentient patch of cosmic despair. It does not engage in written correspondence. Tleep held up a data slate with a trembling paw. It was etched into the containment wall with focused nothingness, sir. The log translates the energy fluctuations as, was feeling cute, might delete your reality later. XO, Fluffy. There was a profound silence on the bridge, broken only by the sanctimonious wail of the alarms. Grohl's rocky face cycled through several shades of furious gray. Fluffy. Kthar looked like he was about to have an aneurysm, which for a Xylaxian involved spontaneously crystallizing. Disregard the absurd moniker. This is a catastrophe. The Gloomfang hunts by sensing acute emotional distress. The more we panic, the stronger and more visible it becomes. It feeds on fear. Then maybe we should turn off the "everybody panic now" sirens. Grohl roared, gesturing at the flashing red lights that were currently painting everything in a lovely shade of impending doom. That is against Emergency Protocol 17, Alpha-9. Kthar snapped back. All personnel must be made aware of a Class Omega threat. We must follow the procedures. And this, right here, is the crux of the problem. When faced with a creature that literally eats panic for breakfast, their solution was to institutionalize panic on a station-wide scale. It's like trying to put out a grease fire with a flamethrower because the manual for the fire extinguisher is in a different font than you're used to. While the two most important people on the station were busy having a procedural slap fight, the ventral maintenance corridor of Deck 7 was an oasis of calm. Well, almost. The alarms were still audible as a dull, irritating thrum, but they were mostly drowned out by the gentle whirring and rhythmic squeaking of a floor buffer. Kyle Mendez was having a pretty decent Tuesday. He'd finally gotten the synth grease stain out of the corridor near the mess hall. The secret, it turned out, was a little citrus-based solvent and a lot of patience, and now he was putting a mirror shine on the linoxy steel flooring of Deck 7. His cart, a glorious monument to organized chaos, was parked neatly against the bulkhead. It had everything a man could need: mops, buckets, a bewildering array of cleaning chemicals, a half-eaten bag of jerky-flavored protein crisps, a small toolkit, and a squeaky toy shaped like a Zorglorian space pig he'd found in a ventilation shaft last month. It squeaked in C-sharp, which he found soothing. A platoon of heavily armed TAC security officers thundered past him, their heavy mag boots leaving scuff marks all over his freshly buffed floor. Kyle sighed, a deep, put-upon sound. He made a mental note to add inconsiderate tactical boots to his list of grievances for the quarterly janitorial review. "Hey," he called out, but they were already gone, charging toward some unseen, floor-scuffing destiny. A few minutes later, the lights in the corridor flickered and died, replaced by the moody, ominous red of the emergency lighting. The whir of his buffer wound down with a sad little moan. "Oh, for crying out loud," Kyle muttered, unplugging the machine. He hated it when they did this. It always messed with his rhythm. He decided to take his break. He grabbed the bag of jerky crisps and leaned against his cart, munching thoughtfully. That's when he saw it. A flicker in the shadows at the far end of the hall. Not a normal flicker, like a faulty light panel. This was a flicker with intent. It was a patch of darkness that was somehow darker than the surrounding darkness, like someone had spilled a bottle of Vantablack. It moved with a liquid grace that was completely at odds with the rigid, metallic angles of the station. Kyle squinted. Huh. The shadow thing resolved itself for a moment. It was huge, easily 9 feet tall if it stood up straight, all sinuous limbs and a head that seemed to be made of coalesced nebulae. It had too many legs, a long, whip-like tail, and eyes that glowed with the soft, cold light of distant galaxies. It looked, Kyle thought, a bit like a spider, a cat, and a puddle of ink had a very confusing baby. Then it saw him. The galactic eyes narrowed. A low thrumming sound filled the air, a bass note so deep Kyle could feel it vibrating in his teeth. He'd heard the scientists on the comms talking about a psionic despair field. This was probably it. It felt less like despair, though, and more like his feelings were about to stage a jailbreak. Kyle held up his bag of crisps. "You want one?" he asked conversationally. The Gloomfang paused. One of its shadowy, multi-jointed legs took a hesitant step forward. The thrumming softened slightly. Kyle tossed a crisp. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc and landed on the floor about 10 feet in front of the creature. The Gloomfang flowed over to it, sniffed it with a non-existent nose, and then a small vortex of pure nothingness opened up where its mouth should be and hoovered the crisp into oblivion. The thrumming sound changed pitch. It went from existential dread to something more like curious housecat. "Yeah, they're pretty good," Kyle said, popping another one into his mouth. "Jerky flavor. Universal constant, I think. Everything likes jerky." He watched the creature for a moment. It was just standing there. It didn't look like it was about to delete his reality. It looked a bit lonely. And maybe a little scared of the god-awful alarms. He knew how it felt. He decided he'd finish his break later. This thing was probably what all the fuss was about, and if he didn't do something, those tax security goons were going to come back and scuff his floors all to hell. And then they'd probably try to shoot this big fella, which seemed rude. "All right," Kyle said to himself, wiping crisp dust on his coveralls. "Let's go see what the grown-ups are yelling about." He gave the Gloomfang a little wave. "You stay put. Don't go phasing through any bulkheads. It's a pain to clean." The Gloomfang just watched him go, its cosmic eyes blinking slowly. The despair field had been downgraded to a gentle, inquisitive hum. Kyle pushed his cart through the red-lit corridors, heading for the command bridge. He had a feeling he was going to need some answers, and probably a bigger bag of crisps. The station's deadliest beast had just been placated with a gas station snack. This was either going to be a very easy problem to solve, or it was about to get monumentally, hilariously complicated. Knowing this place, he was betting on the latter. Kyle arrived at the command bridge to a scene of beautifully orchestrated chaos. High Proctor Kthar was pacing in tight, frantic circles, his long limbs scissoring through the air as he dictated a stream of useless jargon to a floating recorder drone. Cross-reference all known instances of spontaneous dimensional shearing with subspace resonance patterns in the zeta band. And get me a comparative analysis of class omega bioforms and their theoretical interactions with non-baryonic matter. Now. Meanwhile, Chief Grohl was shouting into his comm link, his voice a low growl of frustration. "Team Gamma, report. What do you mean you're emotionally compromised? Get a grip, Sergeant. It's just a sentient void. Shoot it. Team Delta. Why are you hiding in a supply closet? I don't care if it looked at you funny, get out there and, hello. Hello." He slammed the comm panel again. Useless. My entire security force has been reduced to a gaggle of quivering jelloids. Ensign Tleep was curled into a small, furry ball under her console, occasionally emitting a soft, mournful squeak. It was a tableau of peak operational incompetence, and Kyle rolled his cleaning cart right into the middle of it. The squeak of his cart's wonky will cut through the cacophony. 3 pairs of very different eyes snapped toward him. Kthar stopped his pacing. Grohl stopped his yelling. Tleep peeked over her console. "Excuse me," Kyle said, his voice a calm island in their sea of panic. "I was just wondering if anyone has an ETA on this lockdown. The floor buffer on Deck 7 is on a union-mandated charge cycle, and if I don't get it plugged back in within the hour, I have to file a Form 18J for unscheduled power interruption. It's a whole thing." Kthar stared at him as if Kyle had just sprouted a second head that was singing space shanties. "Janitor. What are you doing on the command bridge? This is a restricted area under a code black emergency." "Yeah, I saw the lights," Kyle said, gesturing vaguely. "Bit dramatic, isn't it? Anyway, the turbo lift overrides are all offline, so I had to take the maintenance ladder. Which, by the way," he added, pulling a small notepad from his pocket, "sub-level 3, access shaft 4 beta, the 3rd rung is loose. Someone's gonna break their neck. Just making a note." Grohl stomped over, his face a thundercloud. He was a good 2 feet taller than Kyle and about 4 times as wide. "Human. Do you have any comprehension of the situation? The single most dangerous life form ever catalogued by the Galactic Concordance is loose on this station. My teams are being psychologically dismantled. We are on the verge of total systemic collapse." Kyle looked Grohl up and down, then at his own coveralls. "Right. And I'm the janitor. My job is to clean up messes. This sounds like a big one. So, what's the plan?" The question, so simple and direct, seemed to short-circuit both of them. They were so busy reacting to the crisis that the concept of a plan had apparently gotten lost in the shuffle. "The plan," Kthar said, drawing himself up to his full, insectoid height, "is to follow procedure. We are attempting to triangulate the creature's position by analyzing the localized emotional fallout. Its despair field creates quantifiable ripples in the psychic medium. Once we have a lock, Chief Grohl's remaining, non-traumatized forces will converge and deploy a chronoton stasis field." Kyle nodded slowly, processing this. "Okay. So you're trying to find it by tracking the sad vibes. And how's that going for you?" "It's not." Grohl barked. "The whole station is a giant cloud of sad vibes right now, thanks to these stupid alarms. It's like trying to find a specific drop of water in the middle of an ocean during a hurricane." "Right," Kyle said. "So that's not working. What else you got?" Kthar's mandibles clicked in irritation. "It is the only viable method. The Gloomfang is quasi-incorporeal. It doesn't have a heat signature. It doesn't have a biomass reading. It doesn't show up on any conventional sensor." Kyle thought back to the dark, slinky shape in the corridor. He thought about the jerky-flavored crisp disappearing into a tiny black hole. "It eats, though, right?" Kthar scoffed. "It doesn't eat, in the traditional sense. It metabolizes psionic energy. Despair, fear, anxiety, these are its sustenance. It is a psychic vampire on a macro scale." "Okay, a psychic vampire," Kyle repeated, as if this were a perfectly normal thing to discuss. "But, does it have a favorite flavor of psychic energy? A preferred vintage of existential dread?" This was, without a doubt, the stupidest question Kthar had ever heard. And he had once sat through a 3-day symposium on the mating rituals of silicon-based fungi. That is a meaningless query. It consumes negative emotional spectra. It's not ordering off a menu. "I dunno," Kyle mused, scratching his chin. "Seems to me, most things have a preference. My Aunt Carol's cat wouldn't touch salmon pâté, only tuna. And this thing, it seemed pretty calm back on Deck 7". Grohl and Kthar froze. "Deck 7. Grohl grunted. Team Epsilon reported contact on Deck 7. They said it stared into their souls and showed them every mistake they'd ever made. They're currently in medbay learning how to knit." "Yeah, that sounds dramatic," Kyle said. "It was just hanging out by the aft power conduits. Looked a bit spooked." I gave it a protein crisp. The silence that followed was a physical thing. You could have built a house with it. Ensign Tleep, who had been cautiously emerging from her hiding spot, fell right back under her desk with a soft thud. Kthar slowly rotated his head to face Kyle. The sound was like dry leaves skittering across pavement. You did what? Gave it a snack, Kyle said, holding up the bag. Jerky flavor. It seemed to like it. Disappeared in a sort of personal singularity. Pretty neat. Grohl took a step back, which for attack was the equivalent of a human fainting. He was looking at Kyle not as a janitor, but as some kind of incomprehensible cosmic entity. You fed the Eater of Worlds a chip. It's a crisp, technically, Kyle corrected. Less greasy. And I didn't know it was the Eater of Worlds. It didn't introduce itself. Where does it usually hang out when it's not, escaping? Kthar was struggling to reboot his brain. His entire understanding of predator-prey dynamics, of xenobiology, of the fundamental laws of the universe, had just been assaulted by a man in grease-stained coveralls holding a bag of processed protein. It resides in a null-entropy stasis pod. Its environment is kept at a constant near-absolute zero, bathed in simulated psychic static to keep it docile. Kyle's brow furrowed. So, let me get this straight. You take a creature that you think is made of sadness, and you keep it in a cold, dark, noisy box all by itself. It is the Concordance-approved containment protocol. Yeah, it's also the recipe for making a very depressed and cranky pet, Kyle stated. No wonder it broke out. It was probably bored. And cold. Does it have any toys? Kthar just stared, his mandibles hanging slightly agape. The concept of providing toys for a Class Omega threat had never, in the entire history of the Xylaxian Xenobiology Institute, been proposed. Okay, Kyle said, taking charge with the weary competence of someone who's had to deal with far worse things, like a backed-up sewage line in the Zero-G gym. New plan. We're gonna get it back. But we're gonna do it my way. No sirens, no guns, no despair fields. He turned to his cart and began rummaging around. He pulled out the Zorglorian Space Pig squeaky toy. He grabbed the half-empty bag of jerky crisps. Then he picked up a length of flexible, polished chrome pipe from a side bracket, a replacement part for a sanitation unit, and a magnetic clamp from his toolkit. He attached the clamp to one end of the pipe. Grohl watched, utterly mystified. What is that? Kyle held up his creation. It was, for all intents and purposes, a makeshift leash. This is a good boy delivery system. Now, I need two things. First, turn off those god-awful alarms. They're scaring it. Second, where's the warmest place on the station? Like, a spot that's always nice and toasty. Kthar, finding his voice at last, stammered, the primary fusion converters on the engineering deck. The ambient temperature behind the containment shielding is a stable 38 degrees Celsius. But why? Because, Kyle said, clipping the leash to his belt and grabbing the treats and the squeaky toy, if you were a big, chilly, lonely space cat spider, and you broke out of your freezer, you'd go find a nice warm spot to take a nap, wouldn't you? He started walking toward the bridge exit, leaving two of the most powerful figures on the station standing in stunned, slack-jawed silence. Oh, and someone call Medbay, Kyle added over his shoulder. Tell them the knitting circle on Deck 7 can probably knock off early. I think we're gonna be okay. The command bridge remained silent for a full 10 seconds after Kyle left. The only sound was the distant, fading squeak of his cartwheel and the ever-present, mind-numbing shriek of the station alarms. Finally, Grohl turned to Kthar. His craggy face was a mask of utter bewilderment. Did the janitor just take over this operation? Kthar didn't answer. He was staring at the data slate Ensign Tleep had left behind, the one with the translated etching from the containment wall. XO, Fluffy, he whispered, the words sounding alien and profane on his clicking mandibles. He was beginning to suspect that his multi-volume encyclopedia on apex predators might be missing a very, very important chapter. One titled, Basic Common Sense and the Tactical Application of Jerky. Turn them off, Grohl grunted, his voice low and heavy with a strange new emotion. It might have been resignation. It might have been awe. What? Kthar asked, distracted. The alarms, Grohl clarified, pointing a thick finger at the master control panel. The human said to turn them off. His plan is insane. It defies every tactical doctrine I have ever studied. But it is, by a significant margin, the only plan we currently have that doesn't involve us all cowering in a closet waiting for reality to be unmade. For the first time in his career, High Proctor Kthar considered violating a protocol. He looked at the flashing red lights, listened to the grating siren, and thought of the calm, unassuming human who had just walked out with a squeaky toy and a bag of snacks to face down a cosmic horror. The procedure said the alarms were mandatory. Logic, however, was starting to suggest the procedure was an idiot. With a flick of a spindly digit that felt like both heresy and liberation, Kthar silenced the alarms. The sudden, profound quiet that flooded the station was more shocking than the noise had been. It was a heavy, expectant silence. A silence that seemed to be waiting for a punchline. Down on the engineering deck, Kyle appreciated the quiet. It made it much easier to hear. The engineering section was a cathedral of technology, vast and cavernous, filled with the deep, resonant hum of the station's heart. Towering fusion converters pulsed with a soft blue light, their containment fields shimmering like heat haze. It was, as Kthar had promised, wonderfully warm. Kyle walked calmly through the maze of conduits and machinery, his footsteps echoing in the huge space. He wasn't sneaking. He was just walking. Like he was on his way to fix a leaky faucet. He held the squeaky pig in one hand. "Here, Fluffy," he called out, his voice not much louder than a normal conversational tone. "Come here, you big spooky noodle. I know you're around here somewhere." A flicker of movement from behind Converter 3. A shadow detaching itself from other shadows. The gloom fong emerged, unfolding itself to its full, intimidating height. The galactic eyes fixed on him. The air grew cold, and that low, tooth-vibrating thrum started up again. The despair field. Kyle stopped. He didn't tense up. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just stood there and gave the squeaky pig a little squeeze. Squeak. The C-sharp note echoed oddly in the vast chamber. The gloom fong tilted its nebular head. The thrumming faltered. It was a look of profound, cosmic confusion. This tiny, soft-skinned creature was not screaming. It was not running. It was not dissolving into a puddle of terror. It was making a funny noise. Kyle squeezed it again. Squeak. He took a step forward and tossed a jerky crisp. It landed a few feet from the creature's multi-jointed forelimbs. The gloom fong lowered its head, sniffed the offering, and the little singularity mouth reappeared to vacuum it up. "See?" Kyle said gently. "It's all good. No one's gonna bother you." He took another step. The gloom fong didn't back away. It watched him, its head cocked, a gesture so unexpectedly animal, so mundane, that it completely deflated the creature's aura of cosmic terror. This wasn't a reality eater. This was a giant, weird-looking dog who didn't know what to make of a squeaky toy. Kyle kept walking forward, slow and steady, talking to it in a low, calm voice. "You must have been so bored in that box. And cold, too. This is much nicer, isn't it? Nice and warm back here." He was now standing right in front of it. He was barely waist-high to the thing's chest. He could see the swirling patterns of starlight and dark matter that made up its form. It smelled faintly of ozone and dust, like the air after a thunderstorm. He reached out his hand, the one without the squeaky toy. He reached not for its head, but for a spot just behind one of its forelimbs, where a cluster of pulsating energy sacs gave off a soft, purple glow. It was the alien equivalent of the spot behind a cat's ear. "There now," he murmured, giving the area a gentle scratch. The effect was instantaneous and utterly bizarre. The gloomfang's entire body went boneless. The low, menacing thrum transformed into a deep, vibrating rumble that was, for lack of a better word, a purr. A wave of, not despair, but profound, sleepy contentment washed through the room. The gloomfang leaned into his hand, its immense weight threatening to topple him over. One of its whip-like tails gave a single, happy thump against the deck plating, leaving a small, shimmering dent. "Yeah, that's the spot, isn't it?" Kyle chuckled. "Who's a good sentient void? Who's a good boy?" While continuing to scratch with one hand, he calmly took the makeshift leash with the other. He reached down to the creature's foreleg, if you could call it a leg, and found a spot where the shadow flesh was slightly more solid, like cooled lava. He clipped the magnetic clamp in place. It held firm. The Gloomfang didn't even seem to notice. It was lost in a state of pure, scritch-induced bliss. "All right, big fella," Kyle said, giving it one last pat. "Let's go for a walk. We've got some very important people to go confuse." He gave a gentle tug on the chrome pipe. The Gloomfang, purring like a fusion-powered cement mixer, obediently followed. As they walked, it occasionally nudged Kyle's side with its head, demanding more scratches. Kyle obliged, scratching its flank as they strolled out of the engineering deck, the squeaky pig now tucked back into his pocket. The station's deadliest beast was on a leash. The situation had officially crossed the line from crisis to legend. The walk back to the command bridge was a journey through a gallery of gaping mouths and wide eyes. They passed a pair of junior science officers who had been huddled behind a nutrient dispenser. They saw Kyle first, ambling along with his leash. Then they saw what was on the end of it. One of them, a gelatinous being from Rigel 7, simply lost cohesion and slid into a startled puddle. The other, a bird-like creature, let out a squawk and promptly began trying to burrow into the bulkhead. A maintenance drone zipped around a corner, saw the procession, and immediately flew backward at top speed, emitting a series of panic beeps that translated roughly to "does not compute. Does not compute." Kyle just kept walking, giving the purring Gloomfang an occasional pat. "Don't mind them," he told the creature. "They're just a bit high-strung." The doors to the command bridge hissed open. If the silence before was profound, the silence now was a weapon of mass destruction. Grohl, Kthar, and a now vertical but still trembling Ensign Tleep stared. Their brains collectively attempted to process the scene before them and failed spectacularly. There was their janitor, Kyle, looking mildly bored. In his hand, he held a leash fashioned from a plumbing part. At the other end of the leash was the Gloomfang, the eater of worlds, the sentient despair that had brought the station to its knees. And it was nuzzling Kyle's hip like an overgrown puppy, its tail giving a lazy, floor-denting swish. Kyle ambled over to the main command console and looped the chrome pipe around a stanchion. The Gloomfang settled onto the floor with a contented sigh, its purr making the deck plates hum pleasantly. It rested its nebula-like head on its shadowy paws and closed its galactic eyes. Kyle dusted off his hands. "There you go. All sorted." Grohl was the first to find a word. It was not an elegant one. "How?" he croaked, the single syllable carrying the weight of 1,000 shattered tactical manuals. "He was just lonely," Kyle said with a shrug. "And cold. And you guys were scaring him with all the yelling and the sirens. He's not a monster, he's just a big, sensitive guy." Kthar took a hesitant step forward, his scientific curiosity warring with his instinct to flee the planet. "But, it's despair field. It feeds on negative emotions." "My research." "That's not a despair field, that's a purr," Kyle corrected him patiently. "It's just really, really loud and at a weird frequency. Makes your fillings buzz if you're not used to it. When he gets scared or upset, the purr gets all jagged and unpleasant. When he's happy," he gestured to the snoozing cosmic horror, "it's actually kind of relaxing. Like one of those fancy massage chairs." He paused, then pointed at the creature. "Also, you named him Fluffy. What did you expect? You can't name something fluffy and expect it to be a ravening monster. That's just false advertising." Kthar looked at the data slate again, then at the creature, then at Kyle. The foundations of his academic world were crumbling into dust. But, the containment protocol, the null entropy stasis, it was designed by the top minds at the Concordance. "Well, the top minds at the Concordance are morons," Kyle said bluntly, with the unassailable confidence of a man who knows how to get a scuff mark off Linoxy steel. "You don't stick a social animal in solitary confinement and expect it to be well adjusted. Did any of these top minds ever try just, petting it?" The High Proctor of Xenobiology had no answer. The concept was so fundamentally alien to his field of study, a field that involved plasma scalpels and molecular analysis, not belly rubs, that he couldn't even begin to formulate a response. Grohl, on the other hand, was starting to get it. His mind, built for tactics and direct action, was processing this new information in a very Grohl-like way. So, its weakness is affection. It's not a weakness, Kyle said. It's a need. Like food or water. You were starving him of it. I just gave him a snack and a few scratches. He's fine now. Kyle unclipped the leash. He'll probably just stick around here where it's warm and there are people. Just, maybe don't shoot at him. It makes him anxious. As if on cue, the main view screen chimed. A crisp, officious face appeared. It was Absactron, a species known for their love of clipboards and unannounced inspections. Star Station Epsilon 9, the face said sternly. This is Galactic Inspector Torvin. I am arriving ahead of schedule to conduct your quadrennial readiness and safety audit. Your communication channels have been strangely silent. I trust everything is in order. Kthar went pale, which for him meant turning a shade of light beige. A surprise inspection. Now. After a Class Omega containment breach that had been solved by the janitor with a bag of snacks. His career was over. But before he could spiral, Kyle stepped forward. Everything's perfectly in order, Inspector, he said cheerfully. Just finished a station-wide systems drill. We were testing our new, bioform enrichment program. The inspector raised a skeptical eyebrow ridge. Bioform enrichment. Yep, Kyle said, patting the now stirring Gloomfang on the head. The creature opened its starry eyes and let out a deep, contented rumble. This is our new station mascot, Fluffy. He's part of a pilot program to improve crew morale through interspecies companionship. As you can hear, he's very calming. The inspector stared at the 9-foot-tall shadow creature purring on the command bridge floor. He looked at the calm human petting it. He looked at the stunned silent command crew. A mascot, Torvin repeated slowly. Named Fluffy. That's the one, Kyle confirmed. He's a rescue. Very sweet temperament, once he gets to know you. Just loves a good scratch behind the, energy sac. Inspector Torvin was silent for a long moment. Then, a thin smile crept across his face. How progressive. I'll be sure to make a note of this innovative approach in my report. Carry on, Epsilon 9-inch. The screen went blank. Kthar slowly sank into his command chair. Grohl stared at Kyle with a look of pure, unadulterated reverence. Ensign Tleep was taking notes, her title for the new file reading, Protocol 1K, the Kyle Maneuver. Kyle, for his part, just looked at the scuff marks Grohl's boots had left near the console. Right, he said, heading for the door. Now that that's sorted, I've really got to get back to that buffer. He left the bridge, leaving behind a new station mascot, a shattered scientific paradigm, a deeply impressed security chief, and a high proctor who was seriously considering a career change. Maybe something simpler. Like janitorial work. It suddenly seemed to hold all the secrets of the universe. And probably, better snacks.